Hey guys, Tarke here, and in this video I'm going to do my best to explain the Archnemesis mechanic, all the things I really like about it, and then the one thing that I really don't like, but might also be what makes me like this league more than anything else. It's funny, I've never had this with the league before. Usually when I see a league mechanic, I can go into it and quite quickly be like, this is what I'll like, these are the problem points I could see being an issue, but it's very rare that the one big problem point is what might actually be the best thing about the league. So let's get into that in the end. Also, quickly before we get into it, I've already done a video going over Siege of the Atlas and the patch notes. Check them out on my channel, and there's a timer to Bay class down below. So how does this league actually function? As you're running around, you're doing mapping, you kill rares, they drop these little items. So you're like, oh, Metamorph, I've played this, right? Like, it's collecting organs. Sort of. Now, these don't auto-collect. You've got to manually click on them when you kill the rare, and they go automatically to the Archnemesis inventory. You can see all the previous ones that have been collected, and you can see it does something to monsters. You get a reward. Okay, how do we use them? Well, then as you're going through zones, you'll find these big spooky statues as you go. You click on the button and you're like, oh, okay, I take my modifier item, I drag it over, and I get the reward, and it changes it. This makes sense. I get it. And you're like, all right, there are 4 slots, but I can only put 1 in because 1's highlighted. So how does that work? So you get to do 4 of these fights per zone. Okay, so you do the first one, you get the unique reward. You do the second one, you put something else in. What happens? Every time you do one of these fights and you put more and more of the modifiers in, the fight gets harder and the previous rewards carries across. So you can see it's had the unique reward, he's now added that one, so now he's also gotten the gems and the rares. Now the thing which is neat about this is there are certain like hidden recipes where if you put certain mods in together, they like multiply off each other, which then means that if you want to be clever and you really want to engage with the system, you'll purposely put them in like certain orders. So like you might, if you were playing SF, you really want uniques, maybe you put the unique one in first, then you put the next one in, which like multiplies the amount of uniques that drop. Or more realistically, if you're playing a trade league, you do whichever one gives you the most currency items. All right, cool. So you're like, okay, so Tarke, obviously the main flaw is the thing that we've seen in leagues like Ritual and similar things before, where you got to do a lot of backtracking, hunting for the statues. No, great thing that GG has done. There are actually more statues in a zone than you can use. So you can only do 4 fights, but there might be like 6 or 8 statues, which limits the chance of backtracking. You're like, oh, that's really neat. But they could still be backtracking if, for example, like, you know, all the rares that drop the core mods are at the end of the map and all the statues that are at the start of the map. No, because again, remember, we've got that separate inventory, and any of those little like mod items you pick up are with you. It's probably character bound, not account bound, but anyway, they're with you, and they carry into future zones. So that means that you can like collect a bunch of them in one set of maps and then use them in another set. It also means that, you know, if you like disconnect in a map and you've already picked up your modifiers, you haven't lost anything. Another thing, this league mechanic sort of has like DC protection, which is kind of cool. It sort of does, sort of doesn't. So say you're like with Ritual, right? You had to do the fight like 4 times and you had to get to the end to get any rewards out, right? And if you lost that instance, you've lost it, like it's gone. Whereas with this one, like if you put in one of the modifiers and you do the first fight, you get that reward initially. If you then disconnect, well, you haven't lost like the next 3 like mods you've put in because you only put 1 in at a time. Now, obviously, you'd get the most reward doing the full chain, but if your chain gets interrupted for whatever reason, it's not like you've suddenly lost everything. So that's what I mean by it's got this like sort of pseudo DC protection, which is kind of neat. And as you can see here, if you're clever with how you game the system, and this person purposely put in a bunch of special modifiers just to really stack up the currency, you get some pretty meaningful rewards out of the end of it. Like you'll see a massive just like wall of currency dropping here. And, you know, when people see lots of currency in one place, pretty good. You know, that's a reasonable amount of currency right there. So you're like, okay. So what's the con, Tarke? Is it like, is the mechanic a little too simple? It's a little too similar to like previous league mechanics. Seems quite a lot like Metamorph. Seems quite a lot like Ritual. Seems quite a lot like Ultimatum. What's the flaw? The flaw is you, apparently according to Chris in the Q&A, you only get 2 of these modifiers on average dropping per zone. And you're like, oh, but you need 4, right? Like, you need 4 mods to do the big juicy stuff. So does that mean that if you're doing this in every zone, you never get to do the big juicy stuff? Or you're in a scenario where you need to, like, not run the league mechanic for a couple of zones? Like, you have to collect for a few zones and then spend? Like, is that the problem? Yeah. But I also think that might be one of the best things about the league. And I'm just going to talk for a bit, and I'm curious what you guys think about this. It's quite often that a new league will come out, I'll play it, and I'm like, this is really fun. Especially with the simple leagues, because this is a simple league. But then, you know, after doing it in every single map for however many days or weeks, at the end of it, I'm like, I'm quite bored of this now. Like, there's no real depth to it. It's just the same thing constantly. I could maybe see this league mechanic potentially, I'm not sure, but this league mechanic potentially might have more longevity for me if I'm in, like, a collect and spend cycle. And the collect cycle, it's not like with Incursion, where it's like, I've got to run 12 to then get the temple. You know, like, this could be every other map or every third map. Or if I'm really trying to hoard all the best modifiers to all the best recipes, you know, maybe it's like I do an hour of collecting and then I do like an hour of blasting. It could maybe be alright. Maybe. I could definitely see a scenario, though, where, and obviously because we've got this big new end game, this will alleviate this a lot, but I could see a scenario where it feels like I'm just doing like vanilla maps. Like I'm just doing maps and I'm not really engaging the league mechanic. I'm only engaging the league mechanic like a third of the time or a fifth of the time. But if I want to engage the league mechanic in every single zone, I can just pick up the mods I get and throw them straight in. It's only if I'm really min-maxing that I have this, like, collect cycle. Now, another thing that's been said is that you can actually filter out these modifiers. And this is where that little bit of worry could creep in a little bit. I could sort of see a meta, this is specifically for, like, Trade League Zoomer players, where people work out, like, you know, of the 20 mods or however many mods, actually you only want these 4. Like, these are the only 4 worth picking up. Because you know what people like. Anything under a certain thing, they're like, oh, take it off the filter. It's like whenever I talk to Balamate, he's like, anything under a mirror I don't pick up. But anyway, right? So let's say that the top players decide that you only want 4, right? And you filter everything else out. It might then be a scenario of, like, you know, you do like 3 hours of mapping for then like 20 minutes of Archnemesis gameplay. And then that could feel very vanilla. And then if that becomes like a dominant strategy, a lot of people are aping, that could be a bit whatever. Another thing, I could definitely see some like abuse cases where you run rippy content, like you run tier 16 content to collect all the mods because the mods are tied to eye level. So for example, you couldn't farm like Quarry to get eye level 86 stuff. Now you could like speed run something like Quarry to get lots of these mods, and we could see like a Quarry meta return, which could be kind of ugh. But again, it's like you're having to kill rares, right? So it's not like you just like you run, you find the statue, you leave. You're actually having to clear the zone. So there might be a situation where maybe like you purposely run very tight, very linear maps to get as many of these mods per hour, and then you spend them or whatever. But anyway, that's a separate point. I could see a scenario where you run like your normal rippy tier 16 red content, because that's what you're running anyway. You collect all the mods, and then you spend them in like a white map. Either a tier 1 white map or just like like an unrolled red, so that the Archnemesis fight isn't scary because it isn't affected by map mods, and you're guaranteed to get like your 9 currencies. And if that becomes a strategy, and I don't really know how you balance around that if it's like set loot tables, then that could maybe be kind of lame, because then it's like it's making this big epic boss. Like imagine if you could cheese every metamorph encounter to be easy, right? So we're just gonna have to wait and see how it plays out. But that's really my main concern, is just the fact that it's the 2 modifiers dropping, and then what's the potential gaming of this system. Now again, one of the benefits of this is, you know, they want us to pick up items, and we're not having a scenario like Expedition launch where we're having to pick up like 20 items per zone. You're only picking up 2 items per zone, no excess clicking, but maybe you're not fully getting to engage the mechanic every single time. I don't know. I think it could be really cool. And that limitation, as I said, might end up being one of the best things about it, because it makes everything feel more impactful. And finally, you know, if you're picking less modifiers up, when you do get a good modifier, it's going to feel extra special. Because that was one thing, like, when you have a metamorph, is when you've got all these organs, it makes each organ feel less impactful, right? Same thing with Expedition. Like, if you're getting all the, like, fancy currency, it feels whatever. Whereas if it's the equivalent more like, oh, you're only getting, like, 2 Chaos a map, and then suddenly you get the Exalted Orb, it's pretty good, right? But anyway, let me know what you think of this system. What do you think of the lead mechanic? Do you think it will grab you? Even if it doesn't, the new Atlas endgame looks insane. I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Make sure you check out Baycast this weekend, by the way. Bye-bye.